We'll count to 20, Skip. Get set, go! 1, 2.
I used to come to Skippy Park as a kid.
I'm hoping one day that on the dollar coin for Skippy's 50th birthday, we get Skippy on one side and Waratah Park on the other.
It just gave me a love of wildlife when I was very young, to have that happen, and it was such an awe-inspiring thing.
It does still have the same essence, but that essence is changing, and we fight to maintain that essence, but that is a very difficult thing to keep.
You're listening to Off Track. My name's Anne Jones. Have you heard of Waratah National Park? It isn't a real national park, but rather a fictional land which was the setting of the tally show Skippy the Bush Kangaroo.
Waratah Park is a 12.6 hectare site. To the west it borders Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park with Cowan Creek about 200 metres below the site, and on either side it borders a mixture of bushland and residential development that was recently subdivided.
That's Jenny Harris, Secretary of the Duffy's Forest Residents Association. Duffy's Forest is a semi-rural area near Sydney, and on one edge of it is a patch of Crown land called Waratah Park. It's where they filmed Skippy. Jenny's been organising working bees at Waratah Park for a couple of years now, like the one we're on today. But this program isn't really about a working bee. This is a story of a group of people that have a passion for a patch of land, and each of them has a very different reason for it. One of them is a 1960s TV show starring a stuffed marsupial. In the decades after the filming, a family wildlife adventure park was run on this site, but it had trouble making ends meet. And despite the good intentions of many, for some years the park slowly degraded and became an overgrown mess of weeds and rotting buildings. Now, it's at a crossroads. Later this year, the land is set to take on a new life under the stewardship of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. But meanwhile, on a drizzly morning, an unlikely mix of people turn up for the working bee to do what they can for Waratah Park. Jenny, who's lived at Duffy's Forest for 27 years, explains what she's trying to preserve.
Duffy's Forest is a wonderful place. It's tranquil. There's horses walking along the road. It's quiet. There's a lifestyle there's a lot of bike riders that come out here because it's a nice place to ride. Traffic, although we might consider it a lot of traffic, it's compared with other places in Sydney, it's wonderful.
How significant is the fact that the national park starts, metres away, essentially?
Oh, look, that's very significant, and it surrounds this suburb. So if we don't, protect our own properties and the bushland that provides the buffer between the national park, then there's a real threat to the national park, and the weeds on this site were posing a threat to the national park, and that's another one of the reasons why we're in here. No matter who owned the land, whether it was Crown land or whether it's owned by the Aboriginal Land Council, the condition of the park, the degraded areas, was such that a future was going to be very expensive. Looking for a future was going to be very difficult, because to restore the park would have taken many, many years at great expense, and it might have just been easier to say, no, let's just sell it to developers and develop it. Get the bulldozers in and develop it. But there is, as development happens, large houses are built, manicured gardens, and it does change the way that Duffy's Forest has been in the past.
There's one factor in the potential restoration of the site that cannot be ignored. It's where many of the scenes of Skippy the Bush Kangaroo were filmed, and some argue that that alone makes it a site of significant value to Australian culture.
The Heritage Office were up here during the week looking at the site and have a number of possibilities for heritage listing the site. One being that the Skippy TV set alone would be heritage listed but would be stored at the Powerhouse Museum. So that is one scenario. The other scenario is that the Rangers headquarters would be heritage listed, New South Wales State Heritage listing. And the third, probably the best scenario, is that the Rangers headquarters and some of the, depending on the significance to Aboriginal people, some of the rocky outcrops and cliffs, but that would be up to the Aboriginal people to put in submissions about the relevance of those rocky outcrops and, to their culture. So that would be the best scenario.
Hello.
Hi, how you going? All right?
Hi, I'm good.
So what?
I'm good. Jeez, you can tell you've done some work here this morning.
Done a bit, yep. Between showers and things like that.
Yeah, it's that shows true commitment.
It does indeed. It does.
There are many people with interests in Waratah Park, including Skippy enthusiasts. They see the greatest meaning in the now shabby film set. Here's Peter Staff.
We're at Waratah Park in Duffy's Forest, home of Skippy the bush kangaroo.
So is that your main pull to come here, is the Skippy?
No, both. Waratah Park and also Skippy. I mean, it goes back now 48 years of history. It's the third greatest icon in Australia. That's how it is. In the 1970s, we had the Harbour Bridge, we had the Opera House, we had Waratah Park. They are the facts. Thousands and thousands of people have great memories of Waratah Park, and, they've had barbecues here, they've enjoyed their younger years, etc. I mean, it's the longest running TV show. It's still on TV today, 48 years later. Skippy's still going. 128 countries around the world. We have people from all over the world that want to come out here and still come to that gate and still want to come in and see where Skippy was filmed. Today we're doing a bit of weeding just around the Ranger headquarters, trying to tidy up, etc. here, a bit of drain work, a lot of general maintenance gets done. Obviously you've seen the ladies over in the degraded area, they're doing some planting today. Our main focus here when we come here to Waratah Park is to get rid of all the weeds, because the weeds, I can assure you, through summertime they really grow here. As you can see over there, that's Rhinodoxus. It's a major feral problem we have in the park, and we're trying to eradicate that as much as possible. These people here certainly more than pull their weight, and this is what's important, because these are the only people that actually care about the place.
The common thread among all those with a stake in the future of Waratah Park is that they're all in love with this land for one reason or another. Lynn from Hornsby is interested in the revegetation of the park.
When my children were very little, we used to come out to Duffy's Forest and look at the wildlife and the plants and walk in the bush.
Because what was it like? It used to actually be run as a commercial or wildlife operation, I understand?
It was, yes it was, and it was rather structured with paths and buildings, and a little train used to run down that the kids of course used to like to ride. But there were always lots of wallabies and birds, and I didn't know what the plants were then, so it was all very beautiful. Well, this particular part of the park, which is up the top, where the main entrance and most of the buildings are, has been very degraded. There was lots of the common weed people know is lantana and many, many other weeds, because there was gross disturbance with buildings and people coming in and picnicking and cars and stuff, so they all bring in weeds and disturb the soil, and hence you get the degradation. But there's been a lot of work done by the volunteers here, I can see, and that's why we're planting today.
So what can you see? How can you tell that there's work being done?
Well, I can see because there's very big open spaces, which I presume was lantana, and has been hand weeded many times, because after you remove the gross big weeds, the little ones all come up, and as well as the natives, and they're getting really good native ground cover now. So we're just hoping to supplement that with planting just to help it along. Well,
come over here and tell me what you've been up to with this planting. What have you got here?
Well, what we're planting here with plants were supplied by someone in the group. There's Banksias, and using the common names, there's mint bushes, which have the lovely purple flower, and the soil's really good, so we've been able to get the holes with trowels, and then we've carted bottles and buckets of water from a nearby tap, put them in, water them in, and we're putting plastic tree guards around, which is really ugly, but they stop the wallabies coming and eating the plants.
On Off Track today, I'm in Waratah Park, which at one stage was an animal adventure park, and before that was the set of the tally show Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. It borders Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park and a semi-rural area called Duffy's Forest. Later this year, the land will be transferred to the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, but for now, it's still Crown land, and a mixed group of people form a monthly working bee to clean it up and revegetate. Lynn is constructing plant guards to keep the wallabies from nibbling the seedlings.
They come as a flat pack, and we've just hooked them together, and there's little holes around the bottom which stop the plant being suffocated in really humid hot air. Just lets an airflow through. Push them out with my finger, and then I get the wooden stake and then position it over the plant, with the plant in the middle, obviously, and then get a hammer, a rock, or I've got a trowel, and bash the stake in.
I'm Joan Reid, and I'm a volunteer for Sydney Wildlife. Sydney Wildlife's an organisation run 100% by volunteers, and we are licensed by National Park so that we can look after injured and orphaned animals.
And what have you been up to here at Waratah Park?
Here what we're trying to achieve is a rehabilitation area. So at the moment our focus is on getting a rehabilitation area for macropods. Our backyards just aren't big enough for the macropods to grow strong enough and fast enough to get away from predators.
Have you had some releases that you've used this site for yet?
Yes, we have. We've released 2 animals from this site. We have 2 more in rehabilitation, and there's 2 that are young enough not to need it yet, but they will be coming up here when they do. To be honest, it is just the most wonderful place to be working in. It's just the birds, the animal life here, the whole feel of the place is very relaxing and very, very nice. And there's a lot of history and culture here. I used to come to Skippy Park as a kid.
What are your memories of it?
Just the kangaroos coming up to you, pinching food from you. It was just, I think it just gave me a love of wildlife when I was very young. To have that happen, and it was such an awe-inspiring thing.
I feel a little bit jealous that you get to spend time out here, because just listen to this. It's just beautiful.
It is. But you can't hear the lyrebirds today.
Ah, that'd be right.
You had me worried, son. You've been away for hours.
I can't find Skippy and she's hurt.
I know. She's probably trying to make her way home.
I've looked everywhere.
Well, let's try together. 2 can look better than 1.
The park isn't just home to recovering wildlife and wild species like the lyrebirds. It's also home to the dreams of fans of Skippy, like Peter Stuff, who took me on a tour.
Okay, from the Skippy days, obviously the main focus, of course, is the Ranger headquarters, where actors such as Ed Devereaux, Tony Bonner, Gary Pankhurst, who played Sonny, of course. This is where it all happened. This is the actual building, still to this day standing, where the film was. The 91 episodes of Skippy and the movies were actually made in this particular building here today. And this is the current state it is. As you can see, the floor is looking very good, but it's struggling with obviously a lot of the guttering, etc. And it just needs money spent on it, unfortunately, and that's just how it all is. And back in the days of 1970 onwards, once Skippy finished, there was 130 animals, kangaroos such as grey ones, wallabies, swamp wallaby, potoroos, wallaroos and emus, which used to walk around here and annoy all the people that want to come to this beautiful place and have a barbecue. Skippy put Australia on the map, so people all over the world worshipped Skippy. They still look at it today, so they must have some sort of affection towards Skippy and Waratah park and everything, and all the actors, etc., that went along, and they had a great time. I mean, that was the best part. Everyone I've talked to over the time I've been working with the Waratah Park, etc., not one person's ever said, I hate Skippy. And that's one thing in the world is pretty impressive. So when you think of diplomats and people in suits, maybe you should think of people in fur coats, because actually you may sound strange, but I do know people that have spent a lot of time in their younger years actually going around, travelling around the world with kangaroos and actually going around like a diplomat. And they'd all go running up to the van and go, where's Skippy, where's Skippy? I won't give his name, but he told me the other day he spent at least 3 years of his life, he's an actor, and he did a lot of great work with Skippy, etc.
Who ran down Skippy?
It was an accident. Truly.
We can't find her. She's probably dead.
Go on down to the house, son. She'll turn up.
He's very upset.
He has a right to be. He's grown up with that kangaroo.
Are there other set pieces around and things from the Skippy days that people would be interested in hearing or seeing about?
Yeah, it's pretty limited now because after 48 years, most of it's sort of been taken away, even the signs and things. Yeah. These buildings here are all after Skippy, unfortunately. But I can take you over to some of the views where various scenes were actually filmed in Skippy, which is still here because rock, one of the things, will withstand the weather, etc. So all these particular actual rocks along here were actually parts of the Skippy episodes, various bits and pieces over the time where Skippy was rescued and jumping through rocks, and Sonny was doing this, and someone was abseiling off some more rocks. But we won't go into the health and safety issues. But this was a very famous one over here, this particular one. Just if you like to come through here. Sorry about all the wet and water and everything today. As you can see, we have this view is worldwide. I mean, I've been around the world. I've lived in parts of the world, and I can tell you, if this is not one of the best views in the world, I'd be very surprised. That's Ku-ring-gai National Park there. They're our neighbours. We're lucky to have nice neighbours like that. It starts there and goes all the way across. That's into the distance, back over Hornsby, etc., etc. But this rock area here, where Skippy used to jump up and down here and was filmed with Gary Bankhurst, Sonny, played Sonny Hammond, of course, and all these bits and pieces along here were used in the series. Skippy was probably the greatest diplomat in Australia, and people still to this day don't even understand that, because it's only a kangaroo, and a lot of people out there live their lifestyle today because of Skippy. That's a fact.
It's pretty easy to get swept up with Peter's enthusiasm for Skippy, and he obviously is passionate about having Skippy as a part of Waratah Park's future to protect something that he believes is nationally significant. Jenny Harris from the Residents Association does acknowledge the importance of Skippy, but really, she's more concerned about how the site is developed. A sore point is 2 tracts of land bordering Waratah Park.
They were different lots that were Crown land and became Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, and unfortunately, it was a number of years back. Back in 2000, they were sold. They were sold to developers, and unfortunately, now the 3 sites together would have made a magnificent park. But anyway, that's in the past. And we have to move forward from here and do what we can with this piece of land.
What is it about that development that you don't like?
Well, there was a number of reasons that the local community didn't support it. The site contains a number of well-documented threatened flora and fauna species. I don't think you could get a site that's more threatened by bushfire. They're on a high ridge facing west with very steep slopes all around them. Very shallow, thin soils, so development on those sites threatens Cowan Creek catchment. Cowan Creek's only about 200 metres downhill of the site, also threatens Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park. Fortunately, the site's development has restricted any sort of keeping of animals. Any type of animal is prohibited on these sites, on these developments. So our thought was that if you had to go to those lengths for a condition that is pretty much difficult to enforce, then you really shouldn't have development. So they were the reasons. And this Crown land originally provided a buffer zone for the developed area of Duffy's Forest, a buffer zone to protect the national park. That is how we saw it. So that buffer zone has now been removed. But the other problem that was that there used to be a lot of fire trails and recreational walking trails that ran through all of these sites. So they've been lost. So Duffy's Forest no longer has a perimeter recreational link trail, which we used to have. So we're looking at finding ways of reconnecting little bits of that if we can.
How long have you been living in Duffy's Forest?
27 years.
And how much has it changed in that time?
It has, look, it's changed quite a lot. It's losing that rural appeal that it had. It's probably becoming more larger homes, less the equestrian. There's a lot of pressure on the equestrian industry as larger homes are developed that might have manicured gardens, rather than 20 years ago most of the homes probably had just horse paddocks and animals living on them. So that's only my personal opinion, but that's the change that I see.
The problem is, more and more people would like to have a semi-rural lifestyle too. Take Jennifer, for example. She's along at the working bee even though she lives elsewhere, because she desperately wants to move to Duffy's Forest.
I've been looking for a place in Duffy's Forest for about a year now, and nothing is ever advertised. And I even went to the local real estate agent who said put something up on the billboard, didn't get round to that. And so the other day, because whenever I feel a little down, I tend to go for a drive around Duffy's Forest. It's pathetic, I know, but I just love the horses and the farms, and because I'm from New Zealand, it reminds me a little bit of the open spaces. So I thought, right, so I went and did some internet research and saw that there was a residents association. I thought, bingo. So I sent an email just saying, look, I'd really love to live in the area. Do you know of anyone who might be looking at renting? How should I go about it? And Jenny she sent an email out to all the members and then said, another email, by the way, because I mentioned I love bush regeneration in the email. And she said, by the way, and I didn't hesitate, of course. Yeah, I'd love to be here, and I want to live in an area that has such a good community feel and looks after the area and looks after the bush and the wildlife. So, yeah.
This place, outside of Sydney especially, is probably most well known for the Skippy connection. Does that mean anything to you?
No. Because I was from New Zealand, and of course we had Skippy, but it wasn't the same hoopla that it was here. And I actually found out about that right at the end when I got sent the information. I went, oh, okay, that's cool. But no. Any bush regeneration, but obviously I now feel a little bit more passionate about what Waratah Park is, and preserving it's a really good idea. I'd come back here every month.
We've been in here, Duffy's Forest Residents Association I think we've had a letter of authority from Crown Lands for about two and a half years to undertake this work. And they've been very supportive of what we've been doing.
Will that make a potential handover difficult? Do you feel a bit of ownership over it?
No, because it's a community, I see it as a volunteer ownership of the project. One of my volunteers, I just asked her about planting, and she just said, well, it's your project, you tell me where to plant. And I said, well, no, it's actually a volunteer project. I don't think so. We have been in conversation with the Metro Land Council about finding a future for this site. Well, the ideal case scenario is actually, for me, in fact, what has happened. I'm very pleased that the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council have the land, and we would like to see an Aboriginal heritage and learning centre here. We hope there is a future that includes the rehabilitation of injured wildlife. We'd like to see a multi-use site that has various community opportunities to learn about Aboriginal life. We'd also like the Skippy history included in that.
I think we neglect and probably never quite understood the meaning of Skippy in this country, okay? I think he helped us so much with everything, but I think also that we need to understand that we need to continue saving heritage in this country from the past. I mean, it was so important. And I think everybody just takes it for granted these days and moves on, and they're all too busy in their little lives and worlds to worry about it, because that has achieved absolutely so much in the world. And I think that would be a great idea if we just save the park and for future generations, etc. So, I mean, that just tends to be my attitude towards it all. And this is why we come out here, and these wonderful people all come out to help. And it's been around 48 years, and I'm hoping one day that on the dollar coin for Skippy's 50th birthday, we get Skippy on one side and Waratah Park on the other.
Hey, Skip, come back! Come on, Skip! Hey, Skippy, come back!
The land claim on Waratah Park was settled last year in favour of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council. The handover is scheduled for August 2014. Thank you to Jenny Harris, Peter Staff, Joan Reid, and also to Lynn and Jennifer for speaking with me at the Working Bee.